Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew: Keith Johnson.
Aye, Commodore.
Alan Seiler.
Engage.
And Veronica Dashel.
Hi.
And we're joined by some special guests this week from Elaine and Matt Watch TV. It's Elaine Sweatman.
Hello.
And Matt Sweatman.
Hi, guys.
Woo,
And welcome back, guys.
Yeah.
Yay.
How's it going?
Doing very good. Very good.
Excellent.
Ready for season 4.
Right.
Waiting to see how that cliffhanger ends up.
Oh my gosh.
I wonder what happens.
I think after your rewatch, you realize Quantum Leap is not just the name of a TV show.
Yeah.
Well, Matt and Elaine, you guys have recently done a rewatch, or in some cases, a first-time watch of Star Trek: The Next Generation season 3, and you guys have been joining us on the show as you've been going season by season.
Mhm.
And season 3 is, it's notorious amongst Star Trek fans. It's got a reputation for sort of being the season that Next Generation found itself. It's really when the modern Trek era really sort of found its groove and really got started. So I'm wondering, especially for Elaine, since you've just watched season 1, 2, and 3 for the first time through, is that reputation earned? Did you see that as a new viewer?
Yes, it definitely did earn that reputation. Because I was going through all the episodes again, and there were only like 2 or 3. One, I really have, even though it's been described to me a couple times today, I'm still kind of like, I can't picture it in my head. I don't remember that one at all. It wasn't that it was bad. I just don't remember it. And there were a couple others that were just
How do you know if it was bad? You don't remember it.
No, I remember bad ones. I
Okay.
can remember bad ones. But and then there were a couple others that are kind of like, I sort of remember them, and they were good episodes, but everything else just kind of blew them out of the water. It wasn't that they were bad. They just weren't up to where all the other ones were. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Matt, had you seen season 3 before?
I heard a rumor that maybe I had, yes, but yeah, it's but when I first saw it, I was watching them as they went out. It didn't have the reputation that it has then.
Right.
And I had been enthusiastic about season 1 and 2. I was on board. But I do think the show definitely hit another level of, especially in consistency week after week. And so now that I know that it's got its reputation, it's definitely deserved.
I remember watching it, as it was broadcast, when it was brand new, when it was first run. And, the first episode isn't that great, but I remember watching it and thinking, this looks completely different than whatever we had before. And it's not just a matter of, they changed the uniforms a little bit, and they changed the carpet on the bridge, and, just little touch up kind of things like that. But it looks just completely different. Like, are they using different cameras? Are they using different film stock? Are they lighting the stages differently? It just looks like there's this hard line drawn in the sand after season 2, and you get to season 3, and everything, it just looked, the way I kind of think of it is, season 1 is like a child, it's like kind of living the life that its parents gave to it to live, and and it's just going about its business. Season 2 is like the teenage years, where it's really kind of trying to find itself and trying to find its own identity. And season 3 is the first year of adulthood, where you are who you have grown up to be. And this is the point where you're going to make your own way in the world. And you start from that point and you see where you go. Yeah. And man, it's just a great season.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the uniforms. I think that did have a big part of it, because everyone just looks and sounds, or they just feel more comfortable in their own skin. It's like everyone those season 1 uniforms, it look like they're in it so tight. And I think that the change of uniforms to season 3 makes a big difference to the show.
Yeah.
For the leads. the background characters still only have the first set of uniforms.
And that bugged me back then. I was like, they can't afford uniforms for, Lieutenant, what's his name down in
Right. Right.
Well, those uniforms, one of the reasons you talk about change, those uniforms caused them literal back problems because they were so tight and they were in them for so much of a day. Jean-Luc, Patrick Stewart, and them said they literally had back problems. And I'm sure everybody's noticed by now, everybody talks about the famous Riker lean. Jonathan Frakes in real life has back problems, and he hurt his back. I forget how. The reason he kind of walked with a lean in his head to the side so much on TNG is he had back problems, and that just made it all worse for him. So the new uniforms absolutely helped them. Of course, with the new uniforms, that gives us the Picard maneuver, where he would stand up and pull his thing all the time.
Right. Yeah, and the writing was significantly improved as well.
Oh yeah.
And the Michael Piller was a huge asset in that respect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Elaine, go ahead.
And we have Beverly back.
True.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Woohoo.
Elaine, did the writing jump out to you as feeling any different?
Yes, it did. I mean, the stories were more what I'm looking for. They made more sense.
That's a good start.
I mean, for the most part, and the dialogue I think was better, and it just seemed. Plus, I think with the actors being more comfortable with each other, being the third season, everything just sort of gelled. Like they were able to take the words that they were given and make them better, just because they were now comfortable being Jean-Luc Picard and Riker, and they knew that there were fans. At this point, they knew there were fans that were liking the show, and so it wasn't like in season one where it's like, what are we doing? Are we doing this for no reason at all? Everybody's going to hate us. By third season, they kind of, knew what they were doing, and so everything went well.
Yeah, there is an absolute confidence in season 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some real truths behind that too, because I remember when the series debuted, I remember people like Walter Koenig and others from the original cast said it will never work without them. And a lot of fans thought it would never work. And if you look at the first season, it feels a lot like the original series. I think, Charles, you said season 3 is where it really became its own show. And you can see that it's basically a clone in a lot of ways. And it's a horrible thing to say because people can step aside other than having died. But the truth is, as Gene Roddenberry became more ill and pulled out, that allowed them to have more freedom. Some of the people from the original series, like DC Fontana, who still was great, they started moving away for various reasons. Yeah. Second season was this infamous guy named Maurice Hurley as the showrunner. He's the guy who fired Gates McFadden. And there was nobody loved him. Also, the second season had the showrunner, I believe her name was Melinda Snodgrass. And she wrote some good shows, and they were some deep emotional shows, but it still didn't quite gel. But you can see the second season trying to be more serious. And as you guys said, by the third season, you have Rick Berman and Branyan Braga, Maurice and Michael Piller, was it, Charles, came on?
Yep.
And they made it their own thing, finally, because they were able to jettison the original series weight. They were able to get rid of some people, frankly, who were controlling it, who wanted to be a clone of the original series. And they were able to find themselves their own look and feel. And boy, you can tell it just changes. I mean, it's an amazing jump in quality.
Yeah. Real quick comment from my buddy, Rob Levy. Rob, what's up? Season 3 is when I really fell in love with the show. You could feel the family atmosphere the cast was developing.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think Michael Piller brought a lot of that sort of the humanization of Star Trek, sort of finding the people connections in the sci-fi stories. And reportedly, it was in the first episode of the season, Evolution, they'd given him to write sort of as a test, and it was that speech about baseball, with the event being canceled on account of rain that really grabbed Rick Berman's attention. For one, Rick Berman's a big baseball fan as well, so they connect that. But he's also not like a sci-fi guy. You know what I mean? It's something that he could recognize that regular people at home would respond to in the midst of all this sci-fi stuff. And I think that Michael Piller did a fantastic job throughout his run on Next Gen.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of great interviews with the writing and the Blu-rays of that season. They kind of go into the the structure of the writing team and who reported to who and who had to report to Rick Berman. And ultimately, occasionally you might get summoned to Gene Roddenberry's office, and that was usually not a good thing. And there's a lot of good humorous tales about some of the things Gene Roddenberry wanted from them and what they expected.
Yeah.
Yeah. For example, Captain's Holiday would have been a lot more graphic in the background if Gene Roddenberry had gotten his way. I think Rick Berman put up too much on that. Yeah.
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 Well, what are some episodes that jump out to anyone, either being good or bad?
I think there's a lot of obvious ones in this season that are that people always go to as the good ones, and that's the Yesterday's Enterprises, those kind of things that that just get constantly named as classic episodes of TNG or of Trek at all. So I think that this season is just weighted with some of those really, really great classic episodes.
Yeah, Charles, there's not a bad one in this season to me. There's some I like less, but there's not a bad one. The one for me personally that captured me the most is Who Watches the Watchers. It is one of my favorite of the entire run. I just love everything about that. We talked about Star Trek and how it talks about religion. With us Star Trek, it's Star Trek pro-religion, or is it solidly humanist or agnostic or whatever. And of course, people who are religious can take offense to the show, because if you look at it one way, it basically says if you believe in a God, then you're absolutely going to start persecuting people, and you can interpret literally a rainstorm as a message from God to start killing folk. And that's pretty much what happened in the show. But I love it. I really do believe that there should be a prime directive, although no, the prime directive is problematic. And I just think it's just an incredibly well-written show. It also, one thing we talked about before, I still don't remember music from Star Trek series as much as the original series. I don't know that anybody does. But I remember some of the music from this episode when Picard is taking Nuria's hand and talks about how one day her people get to the stars. I remember the music in that episode. It's just a wonderfully acted episode to me. So that's the one that I was like, wow, this is a new season.
Yep. One that jumped out more this year than in previous viewings, and I think a lot of it has to do with my own experiences and what I brought into it, seeing it now, was Tin Man. I know we're coming if we're doing this chronologically. I am kind of going to the end of the season, but I think, I, having suspected or having a child on the spectrum, having seen how that relates to my own way I view the world and the way I behave, I relate so much more to Tam Elbrum understanding that today than I did at the time when the episode first aired. So I thought it was him finding his purpose in the universe, finding to bond with this alien ship, I thought was a very beautiful, moving story from the perspective I had today versus then.
That's really interesting.
I find that all the time, Matt, with Star Trek episodes that I've never hated Star Trek, but Star Trek episodes that meant something for me when I was watching them when I'm 10 versus now that I'm older. They mean much more to me as I get older. And I never even thought about Tam Elbrum with people who might be on the spectrum and so forth. One thing I love about that episode is it talks about the thing about telepathy that people sometimes don't get. We've talked about this before on the show. Some people think that telepathy is a telepath sends a beam into somebody's head like a radar, and it bounces back and pulls their thoughts with them. But Star Trek seems to indicate, and Spock even said this once, no, telepaths always hear your thoughts. They just have to learn how not to listen. Just like when you sit in a room, crowded people, you learn not to listen to everybody talking. And Tam couldn't turn his power off. And man, would that drive you crazy.
Yes.
When we were doing our every 20 episode, reviews of that number of episodes, that sentence made no sense. But one of the episodes in season 3 that really never gets thought about or mentioned or anything is one of the ones that we discussed when we got to our 60th episode, and that's The High Ground. And we talked at that time about just how good that episode is. And that's one of the lesser ones. That's just one that nobody really comes back to. And it was really good.
I'm trying to remember which one that was.
Yeah, I was like, I don't remember it.
Well, of course.
That's
Surprise!
the one that's basically an IRA analogy where they go to the planet that's this war, and a guy who, gosh, his name is Finn, is leading a terrorist cell, and they're using a crazy dimensional projector.
Yeah. And they kidnap Dr. Crusher and keep her in like that bunker cave thing underground.
And he's a terrorist, but he's also a beautiful artist.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Well, that
fit, Alan. Yeah, go ahead, man.
I was going to say that fit a pattern that really was established this year, where they didn't always end with a big happy ending. It had an end. It's like we don't know what happened to this planet. A character died who, even if he was a terrorist, spoiler warning, but we saw something that would have been nice if we could find a way for him not to have died. And I don't think anything. The planetary conflict didn't really get resolved. They didn't solve everything. And that's something the show they got very good at this year, and not ending it in the way you might think, or wrapping everything up in a nice, neat little bow.
Yeah,
good point.
And back in the day, a slight progressive nod. The lady who's in charge of the security forces for that entire nation was a woman. That was still a deal back in the day. You're right, because at the end, when they kill Finn, she said the death count will go down for a little while, and that's good enough. She's like, that's all I can hope for. The death count will go down.
Right.
And there's another Finn. He also mentioned, man, I find interesting about what would have happened if he lived, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but in real life, a very important political guy is Jerry Adams over in Ireland, and he used to be a member of Sinn Féin, which was an Irish terrorist organization. And in the last few years, it keeps coming up. People have said that he 100% was present at the murders of people. He says he didn't, of course. But then, and there was a thing that Finn said in the episode where you talked about that, Alan. Beverly said, "You should." It's almost funny. She said, "You should be an artist instead of a killer." He said, "I can do both."
I can be
both. What are you supposed to do with a comment like that?
I mean, both are talents that can be developed.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's
Elaine, was there one that jumped out to you?
There are several, but I don't know that I can pick an absolute favorite, because that's hard this season.
Just tell us which ones.
Well, they're the ones that everybody likes. I moved my papers too far away. I'm too blind. I can't see. They're Deja Q, because everybody liked the Q episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, hang on one second. Going through my list here. I'm looking for Sins of the Father was really good.
Yes.
And then yesterday's Enterprise was very good.
Top 5 for me. Top 5.
Yeah. And then
easily.
I've never heard of that one.
and then Sarek.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
those are ones that jump out at me.
the one that no one has mentioned so far that I really like is Offspring. The Offspring.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about
that's a
that
good
one. That
one.
was another one I had heart next to. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was waiting for you to
Hearts.
say that one. I was like, "There's no way Elaine's not going to say that one."
No,
But yeah,
I
so I can say it.
I can't see my papers. There
Go
we
for it,
Yeah,
Veronica. Go for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you like
so,
about that one?
I mean, I like the development of Data's daughter and how she decided her own gender and her own personality, and like they went through different like species of what she wanted to look like and stuff. So I thought that was really interesting in the whole thing where she had an error where she could experience emotions and it overwhelmed her. So I found that really interesting. I like that a lot.
Lal
And
was
was that-
played. Go ahead.
But Jonathan's Frakes' first directing episode.
Yes.
Yes.
Not a bad start.
Good call.
Yeah, I know, right?
Right.
No kidding.
Lal was played by Hallie Todd, and I only have ever seen her in 2 things, and it was this and an episode of The Golden Girls where she plays Blanche Devereaux's niece.
Yes.
And she's like this over-sexualized, prowling the town kind of thing. So Blanche sees herself as a younger girl, and it's hilarious. She's great in
Elaine,
both episodes.
Yes.
I picture in the scene in 10 Forward where Law grabs Riker and
Yes.
He's like, put him down.
Oh, it's
And-
so
and
good. Then when she sees the couple, and she goes, "He's biting that female." And the guy said, "No, that's what you." Then when they basically run out of 10-4, she goes, "Where are they going?"
And
Well,
the
then
episode's not about him, but I love Picard in that episode because throughout, I mean, it's like
Yes.
he knows what Data has just gotten them all into, you know,
Mhm.
and you can just
Yeah.
sort of see it on his face that he knows Starfleet's going to have opinions about this and they're going to show up. And I love the bit where he says, you know, a man is ordered to surrender his child to the state, not while I'm his captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, Charles. Two things about that, which is interesting. When you said Picard, he told Data, he said, "I wish you had consulted me." And Data said, and I laugh every time, "I am not aware that other people on the ship consult you about their making children."
Right.
And then a couple years ago, we did an episode where we did quotes from the various series. That was one of us did. Me or you, Charles, did that line, which was order a man to hand a child over to the state, not as long as I'm his captain. And I'll say this, Elaine, when you guys, I'm doing it now. When you guys are doing the show and you're talking on Facebook, I was crying. I have seen that episode probably 30 times, and I cry every single time because when the admiral comes out and you're boo hissing him, but when he comes out and the admiral is crying and he said his hands moving faster than I can see, and then they start crying, and then she says, and she starts going backwards, flower this, and she dies. I cry every single time. I love that episode.
Oh boy.
One that jumps out to me that it's not one of the big popular ones that everyone talks about, but it's the Survivors. I think the Survivors.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah,
I love that one.
Yeah,
that's so good.
And it has that sort of Twilight Zone, like anthology episode of the week feel to it. And I love John Anderson. I just saw John Anderson in this great episode of The Rifleman like 2 days ago, and I was talking about it in the car. John Anderson, like you just see him in anything, and he's fantastic in everything.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That speech where he confesses at the end of it, his crime. Oh man, that's a powerful scene.
Yeah. And it throws you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had read that he almost didn't take that role because his wife in real life had just passed away the previous year, and so he almost didn't take the role because it would have made he thought it was going to be too much emotionally in real life for him to do that. Yeah.
Okay, favorite moment, and that is Worf says,
"I know
you know what I'm going for already."
Yes.
holding the away team at bay with a non-functional weapon is an act of unmitigated gall. And he says, "Didn't fool you, huh?" He says, "I admire gall."
That is such a great line.
I love it.
That is such a great line. And Matt, like you said, that every time I see that, it still gets when he says, "I killed them all." They're like, "Oh, okay, you shouldn't have done it."
Yeah.
No, you don't understand. I killed them all everywhere. 80 billion people. Right. And I'm like, dude,
that's a good point, Keith, because that goes back to in that episode in DS9 at the end of the Dominion War, where the founder is like, "I want you to kill all the Bajorans," and they're like, "Oh, all the ones on the station?" She goes, "No, all of them, everywhere." That is ruthless,
right? Genocide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What I also like about that, he said he was, I think, a Dowd, and we talk about. Yeah, we talk about the godlike beings in Star Trek, and of course, there's the Q that come up all the time, but there's a few. Now, Ganians had to reveal themselves, but that scares you because there's a race out there that powerful, and where are they? I guess hopefully they're all pacifists, because 80 billion people across who knows how many light years, that's beyond frightening. But it's also a very interesting thing, and sometimes you have to fight to protect people, because had he fought with that kind of power, he could have stopped them somehow. And then when he didn't, he went mad, literally. Wonderful episode.
Yeah.
I was talking about watching this first run and how different this show looked from the first two seasons. And since we're talking about these early episodes, when you start in Evolution, the first episode is okay. It's not bad. It's just that it looks so great. But then you go from that and you have no idea the heights that this season is going to reach. But you go from that first episode to Ensigns of Command. which is really good. And then the survivors, and then who watches the watchers, and then the bonding. And you're like, holy shit, that's 5 episodes in a row that are really, really solid, good, well-written, well-directed, well-acted episodes. And you're just like, this season is blowing my mind. And you haven't even gotten to the really good ones yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like in the original series, Charles knows this, when you see an episode directed by Ralph Sineski, you can tell. It just looks better. It just looks great.
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely.
So I'm looking at the production code list, and the second episode in the season, The Instance of Command, which Alan, you just mentioned, was like, blew me away, was 149. And the first one in the season, Evolution, is production code 150.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah,
It's interesting, isn't it?
Why did they swap those two? Did they not want to start out strong? It's strange.
The Evolution is a good opener to the season too.
It's a good start.
That's
Yeah.
also a good episode.
It's a good one to ease you into the season, because you're just about to go on a rocket ride that's like straight up, and you don't. It's a good one to introduce you because you don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
Well, and that's also the one where we see Beverly and Wesley get to see each other again for the first time, kind of, and it's kind of like, well, I don't know what my son's been up to, and he's like grown up, and so it kind of like getting all the pieces together, like everybody in their spots before you take away.
It's funny you say that, Elaine, because that's an episode of the moment that Gates McFadden loved, because, as you know, she complained that too much of the series, Wesley went to Picard for advice. And she was like, of course he needs a man in his life because he lost his father, but he needed his mother too. And in that episode, he went to her. And I love that. You guys, also, it's funny, you talk about the look of the show, Alan. One of the things that was different, because I remember when Wesley is standing in 10 forward trying to decide, when Wesley's standing in 10 forward on the ship, they don't say it and it's no big deal, but you see the ship pulling out of orbit from the planet where they had just picked up the doctor. And you see the limb of the shadow come across the ship as it's rotating away from the planet. And as Wesley and Guinan are standing there talking at 10 forward, the warp effect comes on. And you see space rush by. And there's no big deal made of it. It's amazing.
It really is. I mean, at the time, I was like surprised by that shot. I thought it was really incredible.
Yeah. Talk about confidence. It wasn't just the writers; it was the special effects and the set designers and the lighting people. Everybody had a confidence at this point. Yeah,
it's almost like whoever was funding this thing gave them a bunch more money, and they may have after 2 seasons, and after it having established itself and having been more or less a success as a syndicated first run show, they may have absolutely said, here, you're doing really well. Let me have a dump truck of money just come and pour stuff at you.
Yeah.
And they ran with it. And it totally paid off.
Yeah.
And you have to, because I mean, it's no small expense to even something as simple as replacing all the costumes for the lead characters. Right. That takes some doing,
Yeah.
Yeah. Not as expensive as it is in Discovery, but
Right. Charles made a good point again, bringing up Michael Piller, because this season, although some of these people had worked on other seasons, this season, you start hearing names that basically last throughout the rest of Star Trek run, all the other series. You have Veenrick Colby, you have Gabrielle Beaumont, you have Les Landau, you have Michael, oh gosh, I just blanked on the guy's name. Battlestar Galactica creator
Ron Moore.
Ron Moore. All these people who have been around, you see their influence more and more in season 3. You see directors direct so many episodes of this season who go on, as you mentioned, Jonathan Frakes. You see that group form, and from this group spins off Voyager, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, and so forth. Just an amazing group of people.
Absolutely.
And it's worth noting that Ron Moore, I mean, he was a fan who sent in a script for their open script submission policy. Which is extremely rare even then in Hollywood, and it's sort of unheard of now because they're worried about everybody suing them. But the fact that the fan can like come in and work on a script, and I mean, to this day, he's doing For All Mankind, and there's a spinoff coming. Like, he's been a major force in science fiction television ever since.
Right. And just from throwing in that little script idea, and oh my God, just look at the career that launched for him.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So I want to share a memory that I have. So at this time, I was working for, I don't know, what was I doing? Maybe working for the publishing company that I used to work for. Anyway, I was at a convention in somewhere, Orlando, New York. I don't even know where I was, but we had gotten about halfway through the season, and yesterday's Enterprise had already happened, and that blew everybody's mind. And so we were at this panel. It was in a big ballroom at a convention, and somebody that's connected with the show was doing, and apparently he had done this for the first 2 seasons also, but he's going to do a little preview of what the rest of the season is going to be. And so this room is like packed. And so he's got his little slideshow up on the front, and he's showing like images from upcoming episodes and telling you episode titles. And I don't remember which one he started with, but I think it was Captain's Holiday was the first one. So he was like, he described that one, and then he talks about Tin Man, and it's another Betazoid, and blah blah blah, and it was really good. And then Hollow Pursuits, which we got to talk about because that introduces a major new recurring character. But he describes that one and shows a little image from the holodeck and all this kind of stuff. And then the Most Toys, I remember him talking about the Most Toys. And then he's like, and then we have an episode coming up after that, and he flashes this, and he's like, we've got a special character that's going to be in this one, and he flashes this image of Sarek.
Wow!
The ballroom went nuts. They were like,
I'm sure.
And so he kind of described what Sarek was going to be about. But the thing that really impressed me was that, and then right after that, we have this episode with another guest character, and he flashed up a picture of Waxana Troy. And she got almost the same response that Sarah got. Because, and I was like, this is a sign that this show has established itself in its own identity, and its characters are now seen as important and as popular as some of the classic characters that we would think of. And I thought that was so telling. It was such an interesting moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It was Richard Arnold who we went to conventions back then with the slideshows.
Yes, that's right. How did you know that?
Because I saw him at Dixie Trek that same year, and he had that same slideshow. We were a little further along though than when you saw it. Okay. So I think there was only like 3 new episodes left when we saw it.
Oh wow!
And he showed, in addition to showing all the slideshows and the stories behind the scenes of everything we had seen, he showed previews of the final 3 episodes. And he paused before he got to the last episode, and he said, "Oh, you are going to hate us. You are going to hate us." He says, "I hate to tell you, but we're ending on a cliffhanger." And
no, don't tell people that.
I know, but he did.
No.
Wow. But I want to say that the reaction to him saying there was a cliffhanger was so negative in that audience. Everybody was
really.
Yeah,
that's so funny.
They were like,
wow,
that's not a usual thing back in that day,
right? Right.
Well,
and in my mind, that's what eventually made the series.
Yes.
So we just didn't know it yet,
right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about that moment on our show before, where you're watching. The season is over. This is the last episode, and here are the Borg, and here's Commander Shelby, and all this stuff, and it's like tense and exciting and engaging, and you're like just sitting on the edge of your seat. And then all the stuff that happens at the end of the episode, and I am literally sitting, I may have been on the floor, but I was on the edge of my floor, and I was watching the screen. I was like glued to the screen, but I kept glancing up at the clock because that second hand kept ticking up to and I'm like, how are they going to resolve this in like 30 seconds? 20 seconds. And he says, "Mr. Worf, fire." And it goes blank. And I'm like, what? I lost my mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we also discussed in the show at that time, Patrick Stewart was in negotiations, and he didn't know if he was coming back, and we didn't know. And it was a very real chance Picard was going to die. Very
well, Elaine doesn't know, so let's not spoil it for her.
I do know because I went and I have seen these 2. We went and saw them at the movie theater, didn't we?
Okay.
Yeah. They had a release.
which was
And-
awful. I mean, the episode was great to see, but it ruined that cliffhanger moment because the scene just keeps
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
I never thought about that.
well, and
Yeah.
and having seen the series Picard, I
You have
think
an
he
idea
lives.
that-
I mean, yeah.
Oh, there's
Okay,
some good
hang on.
stuff.
We got a comment from Mark One. I don't know how to pronounce that. He says season 3 cliffhanger was
I don't
the
know.
best television ever. I really thought we were killing off Captain
Yes.
Picard.
Yeah.
It almost could have
In
happened.
the days before streaming and dumping everything out at once, and
Yeah.
you had to wait the entire
Mhm.
summer.
Summer.
That
Well,
meant
yeah,
you just had to
absolutely.
wait.
And
Well, the
the
title
thing
of the
is,
episode.
So it wasn't quite as big, so there wasn't a whole
Yeah.
lot of chatter
Mhm.
Well, it was
online
Yeah.
about it.
it was
Right.
water cooler talk at the
Yeah.
office,
Mhm.
Exactly.
playground talk.
Yep.
Where people debating what's going to happen. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those who are
Yeah.
a certain age, you have to be a certain age. This was the biggest cliffhanger since Who Killed JR.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
was
bigger,
mad,
bigger,
so-
bigger.
well, it was bigger for us. I don't
Yeah,
know if
yeah.
it was in the culture.
Well,
So
exactly.
Mark also says Shelby was such a great foil for Riker. I would have loved to have seen her again and again in later episodes, and we finally did in Picard.
Yeah.
For a minute.
Not as good, not as good as if we. I mean, you know, we talk all the time about spinoffs now. I would love to have seen a Shelby led show.
Yeah.
I thought she was such
Yeah.
a great character.
Yeah, she was the first officer in the Star Trek Excalibur book series.
Yes,
which
she
was
was
the first book
Oh,
series
really?
that was its own Star Trek series with a new
Right.
crew and
Okay.
everything that Peter David wrote. But yeah,
and that's
she was
that's
a
where the
major
Bricard
character.
come from too.
Yep, that's where the Bricard come from. Well, and yeah, Zach Kebron was
No.
on the Starfleet Academy books before that. But yes.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
It sounded weird when Shelby kind of annoyed me, but I
I
think
agree.
it was because I felt like she was trying way too hard. And I don't know if that was because that's how they wrote her that way.
Mhm.
Maybe because still late 80s, early 90s, women weren't in positions of power as much. And so
Yeah.
they were still kind of writing it from that perspective.
Mhm.
Where if it was written nowadays, I don't think she would have felt so needy. So she kind of annoyed me a little bit watching, and I was kind of like, just sit down, hush. I mean, I knew what she was trying to do, and I understood where she was trying to go, but
Mhm.
she just annoyed me a little bit.
Interesting.
Elaine, it's
Okay.
funny you say that because as a man, I felt that back when I saw that show originally run. As a matter of fact, the only critique I have of that episode is I've always felt the Shelby storyline takes away from the larger storyline. And I've always kind of wondered if because she was a woman, they wrote her as so aggressive in terms of how she was trying to get his job. Because I'd never seen a male character like that. I also remember that Diana Muldaur, by that time, had left as Dr. Pulaski. And she was over on LA Law, and she had a storyline just like that. On LA Law, they basically were telling her she was too aggressive and she needed to back off. And it was because she was a woman. There was a whole storyline about the fact that, and there was actually even the thing, she ended up suing her own law firm. And it was that time when it was, if a woman was aggressive, she was called a certain word.
Mhm.
If a man was
Yeah.
aggressive, he was called. I always thought that Shelby, I thought she was a little over the top with that. And I won't spoil anything. I love Terry Metalis, but let's just say him and these people, a whole bunch of these folks brought back recently. I'm not happy. I'll just leave it alone there for those who haven't seen.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I was gonna say at least Shelby didn't get shoved down an empty turbo lift, but
Well,
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think Shelby very much fits into that mold of like the young female executive, early 90s, like in a
Right.
stereotypically man's world.
Right.
But I do think that she fits very well into Riker's story in that episode, where
yes.
he's a little too comfortable. He what happened to my edge? And here comes a young Riker nipping at his heels, saying,
Yeah.
"You're in my way." Like,
Right.
come on, old man. Like, and now Riker's not the young hotshot anymore, and he's having to come to terms with that and
Yeah.
decide if he's
Literally.
okay with that. But also prove
Yeah.
to himself and to the audience that he could be a captain.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I like her for that part, but there was, and it may have just been the way that she was written. That was
Sure.
just a little too something that just
I
kind
felt
of
the same
like,
way. Yeah.
That's
so interesting. I've never thought that before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny Elaine says that.
She was just a driven character to me.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny, Elaine. I've always felt that way too. But to Charles's point, I think if they had backed off her being so overly aggressive, like then she goes in a poker game and she beats him at poker. It started getting a little silly. But
that part was a little silly. Yes.
Yeah.
And then they arm wrestle and she wins.
Yeah, but what I do like, which I thought was kind of cool, was I've always found interesting. At the end, Riker made the big decision because when they had seconds to decide to kill Picard, she said, "Well, hold on, call Starfleet. Let's get instructions." And Riker said, "There's no time.
There's no time.
They get no warp."
Riker said, "Mr. Warp, fire."
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
Well, he was trying to the title of the episode, Best of Both Worlds. I get to be captain and stay on the Enterprise.
That's right.
Yeah, and of course we could take over the whole episode with just this episode, but I also do like the beautiful scene where Picard is walking the ship with the night before the battle, and he has the conversation with Guinan, which just to me deepens that relationship. And she says, and he said that she goes, basically. The crew likes you, but they don't know if they can survive. And she basically tells him, "You seem like you think you're going to die." He goes, "No, walking the ship before a battle is a naval tradition." And she's like, "Yeah, I think it's usually before they die." Then he comes back and said, "I think it's Admiral Nelson or Lord Nelson did it." She goes, "Yeah, but he died in the battle." It just goes back and forth, and that's so cool. When she walks in the Riker's thing, he's like, "Guinan, I'm busy." She just walks in and sits down. I just love Whoopi Goldberg in that role.
Yeah,
right.
Great.
So a couple of other episodes that are not normally, thought of because this season's got so many good ones that I really enjoy. One of them is The Enemy, where Geordi is on that devil planet and he's stranded with a Romulan and they have to work together to survive. And I thought that was a fabulous episode.
Yeah, it's kind of their takeoff on enemy mine.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Alan, we think alike because when I opened the greeting with I Commodore, it's because Geordi was getting on my nerves. He kept calling it Romulan Commodore for a long time. He kept going, "Okay, Commodore. Okay, Commodore." And he kept "Why you calling me Commodore?" It's like, I don't know, being irritated. Then he found out his name, which I think was Bakra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be funny if it was a Romulanization of Commodore?
Right.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, that's a great. And it also gives LaForge some. Not LaForge. Here I go. It gives LeVar Burton some great acting in that episode.
Yeah.
And then it did something kind of surprising for Star Trek. Worf literally says, "Yeah, if he dies, he dies." I mean, that was pretty intense.
Right.
Yeah, he did.
But then this is also this is where they start to really develop the Klingons in a big way, culturally as well as individually. So you start getting those ones that sort of have that continuing storyline of what's happening with the government and everything on the Klingon homeworld, and all that stuff is really fascinating. But this is also the time when they're really developing the Romulans, and so after that episode. Then we, like a few weeks later, a month or so later, we get the Defector, which is another really, really good Vulcan. It's a really good Romulan episode.
Yes.
Yeah. And sadly, I still don't think the franchise has treated Romulans quite right. But they just don't seem to know how to use them. But these two episodes, I agree, Alan, they were just great episodes. And with Tomalak, what he did, and what was wild is his own people suspected him, and they set all this stuff up. I mean, not Tomalak, I'm sorry, it's the wrong guy. Admiral Jarrok, thank you. Yeah, and they set him up for that was just so powerful, just amazing.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, these two episodes are the most development I think Romulans have ever had, or the most effective development they've ever had in the franchise.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I think. Well, I think that in season 6, I think it is Face of the Enemy. I think that there's some really good insights into who the Romulans are and how they think in that episode too.
Right. Yeah, and after that, they've just never been able to treat them properly. I don't know if the Klingons have taken all the air. I think the Romulans had a little bit of some nice stuff in Deep Space Nine, but even then, not as much. I mean, one of the most memorable episodes of all time, but a guest star in The Pale Moonlight. Yeah, they just never done the Romulans right. It's weird. Picard. Yeah. These were good. These were good. Also, what's fascinating about these episodes, however, both of those episodes that you talked about, Alan, there was a little bit of you hope for the future. It's kind of like, can we slowly break the ice and trust each other? And then you find out, unfortunately, no, at least as far as Romulans go. Because Picard gave their man back, even though Worf let their man die. Which is a bummer.
Okay, so Mark says that Riker was calm and cool. Thomas Riker and Shelby would have complemented each other. That's an interesting pairing I wouldn't thought of. And then it looks like our buddy Wayne has joined the show, and he says, it sounds like I missed a great podcast. Well, luckily for you, there's 15 minutes left to go, so you still got us for a little while.
And we don't delete it when we're done. Like, you can still watch it or listen to it if you want.
We're really generous like that.
The only thing I would say about
will self-destruct in 14 minutes.
The only thing I wonder about Thomas Riker is he had a chip on the shoulder. He was a little bit of a hothead. I don't know if he and Shelby would have been a great combination yet. Because for those who haven't seen Deep Space Nine, he had some issues.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the lighter episodes. I really enjoyed Captain's Holiday.
Yeah.
Yes. Picard gets to metaphorically let his hair down a little bit. He's got he's got his space blouse, and it's basically he's being bogey. Like he's in like a detective story in a tropical paradise. Which is great. I mean, I love them getting Picard off the ship and letting him do something that's sort of unexpected for his character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although I feel for him because it's like, I would understand, just leave me alone. I want to read my book. Quit bothering me. Leave me alone. I have peace and quiet. Let me read my book. I understand his pain with that one. So,
Yes.
Right.
There's some stories on the Blu-ray about, I can't remember if it was Ronald D. Moore or Michael Piller when they came in. One of the first things Patrick Stewart said when he saw them, "Oh yes, welcome on board." Now, when does Picard get to F and F, and fight and make love?
Yeah,
so this was eventually what became that episode was, and Gene Roddenberry had heard it from Patrick, and Gene Roddenberry pitched it to who wrote that one? Shoot, it was one of the writers who came in.
Ira Stephen Bear.
Thank you. Yes, and he was like he got called in to Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry wanted him to go to a planet which everybody had sex all the time. He said he wanted men with men and women with women. And I said, this is all very progressive, but I mean, you do have to sell these shows for over the air on various markets. And I think they did a good job of keeping the risqueness of Risa, and it was pretty clear all the stuff going on without being that graphic about it.
I mean, Gene Roddenberry's own predilections aside, that's a great place to stick Picard, because Picard is a very stuffy guy at that point. So putting him in the hedonist, everyone's naked and having sex planet, it's great. The juxtaposition is great.
Yeah,
man.
Absolutely.
Now I'm not going to be able to put this episode as clean on Apple Podcasts, guys.
Why? We didn't say anything.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, I did say the S word earlier.
No.
And we didn't say any. That's the only bad word that we've had.
Well,
and that wasn't it.
Yeah, that's funny because
you can always edit.
You're talking about that, Matt. You're right, because Patrick Stewart. I mean, you think about it. Patrick Stewart was a Shakespearean actor. And so you're right. He did complain. He's like, "Look, I don't get off the ship because you're not let me do the Kirk thing." And he complained a great deal about the fact that he didn't have romances and he didn't have adventure, and it really frustrated him.
Well, speaking of that, Mark says that speaking of foils, Vash was a fantastic foil for Kirk. She was such a great character.
I love her character. Yeah,
she definitely recurred more often than she did.
She her dynamic with Picard is almost like the Dax Worf dynamic, where they kind of poke fun at the overly serious guy, and I love that she literally has a twinkle in her eye, and it's just great. And she's almost like Indiana Jones stuff like that,
right?
Archaeologists running around selling for whatever commerce they have in that time period.
Oh, what do we think about Menage a Troy?
I love that episode.
Fun episode.
I absolutely love it. When that guy was doing his previews of upcoming episodes and he flashed up the picture of Loxana and everybody cheered, then he was like, and the episode is called Menage a Troy, and the whole place just laughed. that is one of the best pun titles I've ever seen.
Yeah. And that
Oh
was
my
sort
God.
of the time when they're transitioning the Ferengi away from being adversaries to being like comic adversaries.
Yeah.
Because they're very much comic adversaries in this episode.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's so fun.
But
It's
it's a
just a
little
fun
uneven.
episode.
Yeah, but it's a little uneven because that dude was literally going to be one step away from dissecting Loxana, so that was a little weird in an otherwise comedic episode. And Veronica,
Yeah.
you just talk about the clean. I will not talk about the weirdness of Umox. I'm going to
Don't knock it till you try it, baby.
We've been singing the praises of the season for a while. Matt and Elaine, were there any real stinkers for you or episodes you liked less going through this watch?
If I had to pick one, maybe not Hollow episode. No, not at all. A Matter of Perspective. That's what I meant to say.
Okay.
Yeah,
my least
it's probably the weakest.
favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Least favorite.
But
I don't not like it, but it's definitely the weakest.
I was happy to see Riker's interest kind of get him in trouble for a change. But
Right.
but yeah, it's the whole kind of a cliched, the incident, the murder from different perspective, and where the truth lies between the differences in the story. That's
Yeah.
Rashomon.
And there is a conversation to be had about Riker's behavior as and the way the lady described him and how quickly some of his coworkers just rejected her version of the story, but need more time for that. Elaine, what episode did you hate?
I didn't hate any of them, but I think the one, because I don't remember anything about it, I'm going to go with the Vengeance Factor because I don't remember it at all.
Okay.
And Matt described it to me, and I'm kind of like going, nope, can't picture anything in my head about it at all. So, I'm going to pick that one. I don't hate it. I just don't remember anything about it at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Chuck and Veronica, how about you guys?
Yeah, I think those two are probably the weakest ones.
Agreed.
It's a strong season. Like as Matt and Elaine are going through, I always try to comment on their posts, and I'm like, I like this one too. Right. Another good one.
Very broken record.
Right.
Yeah, for me too, those two are the weakest, and I also don't love it or don't hate Allegiance. I think that's when Picard gets replaced, and with the other, and there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah.
Remember that one, Elaine?
That's the one where like they put the fake Picard on the ship.
Yeah.
And that one, the one thing that bothered me about that, it was so obvious that he was not Picard. And it seemed like it took them way too long to catch on to the fact that, that's not Picard. And I'm like, yeah, you think? That's not him. What's wrong with you guys?
That's a common thing on sci-fi television, though.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a problem. The moment someone starts acting weird, you need to put them in the brig immediately and figure out what's going on.
Instead of
not
going,
let them continue acting weird.
They would go, that was weird. What do you think? Yes, that was weird. I don't know. What do you think? And it's like, if everybody thinks it's weird, then do something about it.
Man, I just had a bad day and they throwing me in the brig. I mean, come on.
Exactly. I want to see an episode where that is exactly what happens, and it turns out there is nothing wrong. He was just having a bad day.
That would be a good Lower Decks. Yeah.
Well, they kind of already did that in season 1. Where Boimler thought Mariner thought Boimler's girlfriend was an alien.
That's true. That's very true.
A weird episode for me, which is problematic, of course, more nowadays. Elaine, no spoilers. More problematic with the follow-up. I love the episode Booby Trap. I love that episode only because it starts out with that race of beings who destroyed themselves in the war 1,000 years ago. I love everything about the setup. The asteroid belt is from their war, evidently. And I love that cool thing with the radiation emitters. The stuff with Geordi and Leia Brahms is weird and gets weirder when later on, I'm not going to spoil it. The only reason I have a problem with that is it's literally one of the most illogical plots in Star Trek. Geordi has an entire engineering staff. The ship's about to die, and he by himself, without any of his engineering staff, sits in there and then recreates a hologram and then takes time to give her personality and all this weirdness. It makes no sense at all, but everything around that, them talking about the ship in the bottle. And I remember the music. I love it when they flew the ship out of the asteroid belt. And Picard's like, I got this. And he all but does his fingers like that. I crack my fingers up for those who can't see. And flying, I love everything about that. It's a really cool episode.
Yeah.
Supposedly, originally, they wanted Picard to have the relationship with Leah, like to fall in love with her, but they decided no, that needed to go to Geordi.
That was a good change.
Yeah, because that makes more sense for Geordi to do that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Since we only have a couple of minutes left, I do want to mention one thing. Since we didn't do news at the beginning of the episode, I do want to mention the fact that Patty Yasutaka passed away this week, and she played a character that will be coming up in season 4. So, Elaine, you were not too far off from meeting Nurse Ogawa, and I just wanted to mention really quickly what a wonderful addition to the cast she was, and what a wonderful part that she played in the last 4 or however many seasons of the show.
Yes,
absolutely.
Oh yeah, she figures in one of the best episodes of the series. Again, no spoilers at all. Yeah,
and she's in the first 2 movies as well.
Yeah. She has such a bright, lovely smile too.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, did anyone have any closing thoughts about season 3 before we move on?
It's good.
2 thumbs up.
Good.
2 thumbs up.
If folks see or hear this and they want to follow along with your watch throughs as you guys go into season 4, where can people find more of you, Elaine and Matt?
Oh, you can find us on Facebook at Elaine and Matt Watch TV.
Okay.
Yes.
And feel free to join in and comment and tell us what you think.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome. And where can people find you, Keith?
You can find me on X and Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups. I want to throw one other thing real quick from that season. Wesley Crusher finally gets a proper uniform.
Hey.
In a moment that I actually love.
And how about you, Alan?
All right. 2 things. First, head over to cosmiccreative.com, KOZMIC creative.com, and you can see all the podcasts I do and all the books that I have written and all the books that I've published by other authors. And second, this weekend, I will be at Monsterama here in Atlanta, and I'm looking forward to it. In fact, if you want to see all those books and podcasts that I just mentioned, come to Monsterama. I've got a table there, and I'll have all my stuff just sitting there waiting for you to spend money on. So do so.
And how about us, Franca?
FeltNerdy.com.
Yep. And if you're in the Atlanta area, you can see us not this Friday, but the following Friday at the Sinful Variety Show at the Red Light Cafe. That's an adult-only performance. It's a burlesque show with drag performers and us. And if you're here locally, you can see us at Dragon Con. We'll be doing 3 of our own shows at Dragon Con, both some all-ages shows and family-friendly, and appearing in the Dragon Con Puppet Slam. Where else can people find us?
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
That's right. And join us next week. We'll be joined by Nick Wright of the Dragon Con Trek Track. And we'll be talking a lot about the Trek Track and some things that are coming up and just sort of talking general Star Trek with Nick. It's going to be a lot of fun. That'll be next Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And do you have a closing for us this week, Veronica?
Yes, because you reminded me to look something up.
Ooh, good job.
I know, right? Good job, Chuck. That's the problem with believing in a supernatural being, trying to determine what he wants.
Great job. Great job.
All right.
Wow.
All right, everybody.
Diggity.
Ending.
Yeah.
Bye,
Bye, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next Thursday.